All right. Just making sure everything is up and running. And then I will revert back. Here we go. Hello everyone. Whoever is here, welcome. Merry Christmas. Whatever it is you did this week, happy early new year. So many things we are going to talk about. I have way too many tabs up to the point where I can't see any titles anymore. So good luck to me clicking on everything. Just to get some stuff out of the way here, as always, you can support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate your support that way. And if you have questions at any point during the stories, we will get to them in between all the stories. I have Den, who is helping out in the comments, moderating stuff. He will respond with his name under Friendly Atheist if anything comes from me. It is coming from Den because I can't type and talk at the same time. One last thing before I get started is that this Sunday morning, I'm going to start up my whole series on Revelation, the book of Revelation. It's a thing I kickstarted for several months ago. We were able to raise enough for that. And so book, the first chapter in the book of Revelation, that's going to go up Sunday, and hopefully it'll go up every week after that until we're done. So I'm excited to finally get that off the ground. So that'll be this Sunday morning, and it should already be on my channel. You can go set up a notification for that right now. You got nothing better to do on Sunday morning. You're not going to church. So let me get started with a story about Chick-fil-A, which I didn't realize we were still talking about all these years later, but somehow it is one of those stories that just pops up everywhere, no matter what, at all times. It's always in the news. And the reason we are talking about Chick-fil-A involves a proposed bill in the state of New York. And let me make some sense of this before I show you the bill itself. The state of New York has a bunch of transportation hubs where trains go, and people are flowing through those locations every day. There's no days off if you're traveling like that. The state also owns the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So they have to figure out what restaurants can be in those rest areas. And they're kind of opening up the bidding process for different restaurants that may want to open up. And one of the rules that they plan to have for all future locations that are opening up in a bunch of new rest areas is that they have to be open every day of the week. Why? Because people travel every day of the week. What good is it for your business to open up like at one of these rest areas and then say, you know what? We've decided to be closed on these particular days because that doesn't help anybody. So this is the bill I'm going to show you. This is here it is. You can see it at the top. This is from the state's website, blah blah blah. Lots of stuff happening in this bill. But the part I want to show you is this bit right over here, because I know it's a lot of reading, I know it's a lot of small font, but basically there is a company named Applegreen right here. They're the vendor that kind of decides which restaurants are going to open at all of these service areas. And notice what it says right here. Applegreen's portfolio of companies include Chick-fil-A, which by company policy is closed on Sundays and which has already opened its 7 service areas. While there's nothing objectionable about a fast food restaurant closing on a particular day of the week, service areas dedicated to travelers is an inappropriate location for such a restaurant. Publicly owned service areas should use their space to maximally benefit the public. Allowing for retail space to go unused 1/7 of the week or more is a disservice and unnecessary inconvenience to travelers who rely on these service areas. Again, all of that makes perfect sense. They cited Chick-fil-A because it famously is closed on Sundays. Why? Because its Christian founders said, we want to honor the Sabbath, we want to honor God. So we're going to stay closed on Sundays, even if that is bad for business. And that's a thing they've done forever. It's a thing they are famously known for. I should also mention that at several rest areas already overseen by New York State officials, there are 7 Chick-fil-A's already there. They close on Sundays. New York is basically saying, listen, those 7 Chick-fil-A's, Chick-fil-A, I don't know what the plural is, those 7 can keep doing whatever it is they do. This legislation would not affect them at all. What about Chick-fil-A restaurants in the state of New York, elsewhere, like just standing on their own? They can keep doing their thing too. This legislation does not affect any of them. They're just saying from here forward, when we're opening new rest areas and we set up new contracts with new vendors, they got to be open every day of the week, because that's just what the public needs. We're trying to help the consumers. We're trying to get people to take public transportation. It doesn't help us to give you a contract and then you're closed on Sundays. But whatever, keep doing it where you already exist. You just can't do it moving forward. And if you can't abide by that, then you don't get to open up in these rest areas. Just do it everywhere else. So all of that seems perfectly sensible. It seems fine. It seems tailored to customers who are going to travel on Sundays. I don't see anything wrong with that. Notice particularly they are not saying anything about religion in that proposed bill in New York State. This is not like an anti-Christian piece of legislation, because there are other Christian-owned restaurants that are not closed on Sundays. They might be able to open up if they want to go through the bidding process. There's nothing stopping that. If Chick-fil-A wanted to stay open on Sundays in these new locations, they could also be considered to open up in these locations. So nothing about this legislation is anti-Christian. But you know how this is going to play out, right? And I should say, by the way, this has happened before. In fact, in 2015, I'm going to show you this. There was a restaurant, there was a Chick-fil-A restaurant in the Minneapolis St. Paul airport. And this article in the Star Tribune made a lot of news in 2015 because they said the airport, you would also think restaurants at the airport need to be open every day of the week. And that is what their contract says, because planes go in and out on Sundays. We need to help these customers. But for Chick-fil-A, the people overseeing the airport in Minneapolis, St. Paul, they said, you know what? We'll grant an exception to Chick-fil-A. They're allowed to be closed on Sundays. Now, the reason they allowed for an exception here is because they said, well, we're in the business of making money. It's not our job to make sure customers are satisfied. We're a privately owned business here. And the vendor basically said, Chick-fil-A makes more money in 6 days than the rest of these restaurants make in 7. So you know what? If they want to take Sundays off and that's the deal we got to make for them to be one of the airport vendors, we'll take it. And so that was the article back then. In New York State, however, this is a state, we're talking about state-owned rest areas. They got to take care of the public, and that is a bigger priority than whether or not these vendors, these companies make money. Everyone can win here, by the way. It's not like one of them has to lose. But that's why there was that trade-off in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So even if Chick-fil-A can make a ton of money, it's just not helpful to anybody if they're closed on Sundays. And in fact, this is what the sponsor for this bill told news outlets. Tony Simone, the guy who sponsored the bill, said in an interview with CNN that the bill has nothing to do with religion. And he said, yes, I'm saying this, not him, by the way. Chick-fil-A does have a history of being anti-LGBTQ. Its founders have spoken out against same-sex marriage. They spoke out against marriage equality bills. They also donated proceeds from Chick-fil-A to anti-gay organizations. Now, I should say, I think they stopped doing that a few years ago. I don't know if that's still accurate, but they used to for sure. And that's why Chick-fil-A kind of has a rap as being anti-LGBTQ. But the guy who sponsored this legislation in New York said it doesn't matter what their beliefs are, how they operate, if they operate as a Christian company. None of that matters. He said, quote, "This is about making sure the throughways have rest stops that support and have our travelers be able to be serviced. This is a consumer protection bill. If every restaurant wanted to operate by Chick-fil-A rules, customers would be screwed on Sundays if they wanted to get food." And what about like truck drivers that need to stop at these rest areas for resting, for sustenance? Like, it's really bad if they don't have options anymore. And you want everyone to play by the same rules. So that's kind of why everyone's getting mad about this. And then, of course, you have Republican lawmakers like Lindsey Graham, who showed up in front of a Chick-fil-A wherever he was. That's not in the airport, by the way. He just went to a random Chick-fil-A and tweeted this: "As if the insanity by the left couldn't get any worse, Democrats in New York are trying to force Chick-fil-A to open on Sundays. I showed up to their Manhattan location today while visiting NYC to send a clear message. Hands off our Chick-fil-A. Give me money, join me in this fight. Here's the link. God bless." Yada, yada. Okay. I just want to point out he's blatantly lying here. One, this Manhattan restaurant is not anything anyone's talking about. They can be closed on Sundays. No one cares. But also, look at this. Democrats in New York are trying to force Chick-fil-A to open on Sundays. That is a lie. That's not what they're doing. No one is telling Chick-fil-A you got to break your own rules and you got to be open on Sundays. No. I want this to be very clear to everybody. State officials, even if they pass this bill, what they are saying is if you want to operate from here on forward, from here on out, in certain rest areas operated by state officials, then you got to be open 7 days a week. If Chick-fil-A does not want to play by that rule, no one is forcing them to do it. They have thousands and thousands of restaurants. They don't have to be like in those 5 new places. It'll be fine. The question is, do they want to play by the rules that the state is setting or not? And if the answer is no, then that's it. Then they can just keep doing what they do everywhere else and at the 7 Chick-fil-A's that already exist in New York rest areas. No one's saying those have to change their policies at all. So the fact that Lindsey Graham is trying to make this into a thing when no one's complaining about it, I mean, I don't know if that says more about the GOP, guys like him, or whether it says more about how gullible and stupid he thinks Republican voters are, that they would get riled up by this sort of fake propaganda, whatever it is he's doing. Like, none of this is happening. This is what he said to Fox and Friends. Lindsey Graham, I should say. "The idea that the state of New York is going to make a company change its policies it's had from its founding. No, they're not. No one's doing that." And then he added, "And to the people in New York who are pushing this, you're in for one hell of a fight," said Lindsey Graham to fighters who don't exist because no one is making Chick-fil-A do anything. If they want to operate by their religious rules, and their religious rules do not function in public venues, then the people who own the public venues get to say, okay, then you can't be here. That's it. Our job is to help the public. It's inclusive. We need to set standards that everyone has to follow. If you want to play by our rules, come on in. I'm sure everyone would be glad to have them because they sell a lot of products. People like their food. It's fine. It is what it is. But no one's forcing the chain to do this against their will. There's nothing illegal in this New York bill. There's nothing to rally around. No one's calling for a Chick-fil-A boycott. I mean, not over this. It's just a right-wing grifter using any opportunity he can to cosplay as a defender of Christianity, against the evil forces that, if Chick-fil-A operated by the state of New York's rules at these rest areas, would just make Chick-fil-A more money and not affect the places that already exist, that don't want to play by the rules. Like, how bad are these evil people Lindsey Graham is against that Chick-fil-A would make more money if they did what the lawmakers wanted them to agree to? It's not persecution. if this is the worst they could think of when it comes to Christian persecution, where it helps the Christians supposedly being persecuted, they need to rethink their strategy. One last thing to point out with this story: the guy who sponsored this bill, Tony Simone, this is what he said, uh, responding to Lindsey Graham making a big deal of this. This is to CBS News. Had Graham read the bill, quote, he would know that the legislation would not affect current Chick-fil-A locations. To which I just have to say, like, why are you acting like Lindsey Graham has not read the bill? That's far too generous. Lindsey Graham has absolutely read the bill. He knows what it says. He just doesn't care because Lindsey Graham knows it's easier to whip gullible conservatives into a frenzy over a culture war issue and then raise money off of it than to tell his voters the truth. He's unable to do that. It's why he just flip flops. It's why he supports Trump. Like, that's a game to him. Telling the truth is not why he's in office. He just wants to whip Republicans into a frenzy because Trump ain't doing it for them. For what it's worth, Chick-fil-A has not said anything publicly about the New York bill, and I don't know why they would either, because New York isn't coming after them. They're doing just fine in New York, and even if this proposed legislation passes, Chick-fil-A will still be doing just fine, so they shouldn't comment. I hope they don't. There's nothing for them to comment on. It's just another example of right-wing bullshittery. I don't know how else to put it. I will pause there and let's see if there are any questions, comments. Happy to go through any of those while I close up 3 of my 97 tabs here. And then I'll get to any questions. The Sabbath is Saturday. Yeah, I couldn't find this when I was trying to research this. I don't know why the Chick-fil-A owners decided to close up on Sunday in honor of the Sabbath, because everyone celebrates it at a different time. I think the idea was, let's just have a day of rest. Their day of rest was Sunday, and that was that. But you're right. Like, depending on who you're talking to, the Sabbath may be on a different day. It's not like everyone just takes Sunday off. I mean, famously, Christians will finish church services and then go to restaurants, even though servers have to be working in order to serve them, and then not tip very well because they say you should be resting or something. It doesn't make any sense. Uh, weren't they angry at Chick-fil-A for a pro-LGBTQ hire? You know what? I'm not familiar with that. I don't know when that happened. I know they tried to, as a corporation, stop being known as the anti-gay company for a little while, but then they were still kind of making indirect donations to anti-LGBTQ groups. Whatever. I mean, to be clear, when it comes to hiring, they have a non-discriminatory process. Like, they'll hire you if you're gay, if you're not Christian, whatever. There's no faith policy to work at a Chick-fil-A. And I think people still kind of have the impression, though, that the company is anti-gay when they seem to have taken steps away from that. But I don't know. I'm vegetarian and I'm liberal, so Chick-fil-A really isn't in my roster of places to go anytime I'm anywhere. I'm not their audience. Okay. I'm not state owned. Thruway is an authority. Thank you for correcting that. My apologies for that. Then the state of New York, though, I guess, has authority over the authority. Like, they can set rules that the authority has to play by. I hope that's correct. There is oversight in a way that you wouldn't see in other places. Thanks for clearing that up. They are not public venues, though. For the record, having an authority-owned highways isn't great, and I'd be happy for the state to take them back. Fair enough. I'm not a New Yorker. I don't know how New York does its things, but thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, hit that like, everybody. I don't know where it is. Probably there. Thank you. I appreciate that donation. Um, and hey, would you consider interviewing New Testament scholars such as Bart Ehrman and Dan McClellan for your Revelation series? That might be very interesting. Not for the series, because the series has a rhythm to it and it's like already kind of done and submitted, and we're editing it right now. I have, I think, spoken to Bart Ehrman in the past, who's written he's a New Testament scholar who's written several books like Misquoting Jesus. Fascinating guy to talk to about that stuff. I would also say, though, like, when it comes to the scholarship, I'm certainly not an academic on this stuff. I'm an idiot on YouTube. You know what I mean? Um, so I can ask questions, but I'm not well versed enough to even talk to Bart Ehrman and get, and I don't know Dan McClellan, I should say. I'm sure he's fine. Um, in terms of what to ask them, what to get their opinions about, those are questions I would have to solicit from other people because I don't even know where to begin about it. But Art Ehrman has a really interesting channel where he talks about a lot of stuff, especially about the history of the Bible, how it was written. And I know there are a lot of atheists who find that stuff really interesting. As a separate thing, not for the Revelation series, but as a separate thing, they might be very interesting to talk to, and I will consider that. All right. If nothing else is there, I am going to go to the next story here, which just makes me laugh. Okay, here's the backdrop for you. Here's the question. It's a pop quiz. Where was Jesus born? If you had to pick a continent of where Jesus was born, which continent would it be? And let's assume for a second Jesus is historically real and he existed. I'm not getting into that here. But according to the legend, if he was born in Bethlehem, what continent was he born on? Right? And there is an answer to this because Bethlehem is situated in what is now known as the West Bank, which is in the Israeli occupied territory. And that technically resides in the continent of Asia. Again, you can divvy that up however you want, but if you have 7 options, like an Antarctica ain't it, Asia is the right answer. Which is why it's interesting that a recent article in Christianity Today, the evangelical publication, um, this is the headline: How Asian Artists Picture Jesus's Birth from the year 1240 to today, which is interesting. I'm curious about that. How did they depict Jesus for the past, millennium? And here's how the article begins. Jesus was born in Asia. He was Asian. Yet the preponderance of Christian art that shows him at home in Europe has meant that he is embedded deeply in the popular imagination as Western. And just think about that for a second, because this is an interesting concept that I don't think I had really spent any time thinking about. Like, Jesus is technically Asian based on where he was born. It's also true that different cultures have depicted Jesus in ways that are most familiar to them. So if you live in Ethiopia and you look at pictures of Jesus, paintings of Jesus over the past centuries, they depict some of them will depict Jesus as black. If you go to India and you look at paintings from India, you will see an Indian Jesus. Like, you can play this game with any culture. They paint Jesus and characters from the Bible as if they belong to their cultures. That's not weird. That happens all the time. Now, why are we all thinking of, like, if you think of a familiar painting of Jesus, you're thinking of like the long-haired, blue-eyed, white-skinned Jesus? Well, a lot of those came from like Renaissance era paintings of Jesus from Europe. And those are the ones that became famous that we're all familiar with. Like, it's not because those are historically accurate paintings of Jesus. It's because the guys who drew him, that's how they envisioned Jesus. You know what I mean? It's not like the Bible describes him that way. Plus, if you imagine Jesus to be like a Middle Eastern Jew, he probably had dark skin. Like, none of those white skinned Jesus are really accurate, right? So, again, going back to this Christianity Today article, Jesus was born in Asia. He was Asian. That is technically accurate. And it is also true that we have a very westernized idea of what Jesus looks like, and that's largely based on other paintings. And this is also interesting from this article. Some may object to depicting Jesus as anything other than a brown male, even though he's usually white in paintings, born into a Jewish family in Bethlehem of Judea in the first century, believing that doing so undermines his historicity. But Christian artists who tackle the subject of the incarnation are often aiming not at historical realism, but at theological meaning. And again, I think that is worth taking seriously. None of these people painting Jesus are looking at history and saying, well, what did those people look like back in the day? Of course, they're not looking for historical accuracy. They're just trying to paint a scene and tell a story. That's what art is, right? That's fine. That's fine. That is how art works. There's nothing weird about that. Which is to say, like, I remember seeing this painting a while ago of what would Jesus actually look like, and this is the painting that came up. It's like, yeah, if you think about it, that kind of is more like what someone living in Bethlehem in the first century would have looked like. Dark skin with a beard, short hair. Like, that's very much not the Jesus with long flowing hair. You know what I mean? But you don't see that image very often, right? Reasons. Why is that? Who knows? Anyway, so the person who wrote this article in Christianity Today is Victoria Emily Jones, who happens to blog at a website called Art and Theology. So she's been studying this stuff for a really long time, certainly spent years writing about it. So she seems uniquely equipped to talk about how Asian artists have depicted Jesus over the years. And when I was going through the article, there were some really, really interesting paintings all throughout this essay. Here's one example of it right here. This is from Korea. The Birth of Jesus Christ. I'm going to butcher the name, but Kim Ki Chang. And this is the painting right here. And I'm going to zoom in. I mean, you can just tell that the people in the painting have these Chinese features to them. Would white Christians in the United States be familiar with that image? No, it's not what nativity scenes look like in the United States. But okay, that is how a Chinese Christian depicted like the nativity. Interesting. I've never seen that painting before. I found that really interesting. Here's another one I really liked. I want to show you. Oh, look at this one. This was interesting. From the Philippines. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, but the painting is The Meaning of Christmas by Christopher Ardenia. And again, look at this thing. Oh no, come back. Look at this painting. It just shows Jesus with surrounded by people with these facial features that you will not see in Western portraits of Jesus, Western paintings of Jesus. Just really interesting how all these cultures are kind of telling the same story, but in a way their audiences may consider uh, more familiar to them. So again, why is this article being published in Christianity Today, and why was it published around Christmas time? The point that the author said in the article, and I'm going to go back to that for just a second. The point that the author raised in the article is worthwhile because she's kind of saying that it doesn't matter how they depicted it. Here's what she said. Whatever the motive or religious background of the artist, visual interpretations of this sacred story offer a gift of beauty to the global church. Coupled with Asian Christian artists of the past 50 years, vibrant new imaginings of the Nativity abound. These 9 artworks proclaim the expansiveness of Christ's kingdom. I mean, all right, fine. It's written for a Christian audience. You can't be mad at her for saying all that stuff. But I mean, yeah, people in other parts of the world aren't necessarily going to connect with white European Jesus, nor are their descendants. So their artists paint a different type of Jesus. Very interesting, right? It should be. It's fascinating. That is how they're depicting it. None of this should be controversial. If anything, let's say you're a conservative Christian, I think you would be able to read that article, look at the images, and celebrate how universal your chosen myth happens to be. Right? Like, look at how the Christian story transcends all these cultures and geographical boundaries. I could totally see how Christians could say, see, that's how you know we're a powerhouse in the game of religion. That is not how Christians reacted to this article. They were so mad, like at the first line, saying Jesus is Asian, which again is literally accurate. if you believe he was born in Bethlehem. They were so mad at the idea that Jesus is Asian that they didn't read anything else in that story. They did not get the point of the story, which is that Asian artists depict Jesus with features and surroundings that are familiar to the Asian people where they live. They didn't do that. Nope, they just said, "What? Jesus? Asian? Never, you blasphemer." Like, they responded with vitriol. I'm going to show you some of the stuff they responded with because it goes from just like angry to insane. Here's just a typical one, and again, I'll show you this. I just want you to know most of these are responding to a tweet from Christianity Today, just saying Jesus was born in Asia. He was Asian. It's the first line in the article. The artists in this photo essay bring him back to Asia, but not to ancient Israel, right? That's what the article said. And the first response here, please delete your account. Wait, it gets worse. Here's another response to the same tweet. Blasphemy. Jesus is a Jew. It's necessary for our salvation that he is a son of David from the tribe of Judea and born in Bethlehem. Stop this nonsense. He isn't European, Asian, Palestinian, or black. He's a Jew, the king of the Jews, and therefore the savior of the world. Nothing in the article says he's not. This is someone who did not read the article and totally missed the point, and apparently thinks it's like anti-Semitic, and also seems to think by saying he was born in Asia that we are suggesting something. I don't know. I don't know what this dude is mad about. Wait, it gets worse. Here's someone else. This is a guy that runs like the Babylon Bee or something. He's connected to it. Hey, next, can you please do an article with a bunch of AI images of Jesus if he were Rosa Parks? I don't know if that's supposed to be funny. It's not, but that also explains every piece on the Babylon Bee. What is he trying to get at? Here's another one. You have to hate truth to post something so audaciously false. What is the purpose? What is the motive here? What did Christianity Today, the white evangelical publication of note, what did they say? They said Jesus was born in Bethlehem, so he's Asian. And apparently these people are so mad that it has to be a lie. They can only understand a white Jesus born in what, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, is it? There's no other place. What are they mad about? Wait, it gets worse. You should change your name to Today. There's nothing Christian going on over there. He is accusing a Christian author writing at a Christian publication of not being Christian because they said the Christian story, if true, happened in Bethlehem. I don't know. I feel like I'm the guy that's supposed to be mad at things Christianity Today does, but I'm totally cool with that particular article. And all of these Christians are 100% not my favorite. Oh my God, look at this. Jesus was born in America. He was American. See, I can say stupid stuff too. How do you respond to people this dumb? That's not what they were saying. Jesus, according to the Christian legend, was born in Bethlehem. Yes, that makes him Asian in the continent of Asia. It is accurate. Here's another similar one. You just change your name to paganism today at this point and stop with this utter garbage nonsense. Unbelievable. Hey, if they change it to paganism today, at least the right people would get credit for Christian beliefs. Ken Ham, the creationist, he also got involved. I would show you the actual tweet, but he blocked me a long time ago. So I'll just show you a screenshot of his tweet. How could an item depicting Jesus, imagine I have an Australian accent, I'm not going to try. How could an item depicting Jesus as Asian be even published in a Christian magazine? Well, it's all consistent with what has been happening over the years with the rampant compromise in the church on Genesis. He has to find a way to make it about his thing every time. Christianity Today apparently disrespecting the written word of God. That's why I've always said that my ministry, no one cares. God's people need to return to the authority of God's word beginning in Genesis. Again, He's mad about something that no one said. What is happening? I think Franklin Graham took the cake, though. The famous evangelist found a way to work in MAGA talking points. Are they trying to cancel the real Jesus? The real Jesus? Okay, we're going to do this a line at a time because he says too many stupid things. Are they trying to cancel Jesus? Yeah, buddy. Christianity Today really hates Jesus, man. And are they trying to cancel the real Jesus? Who is the real Jesus, if not the same Jesus they were talking about in the article? Franklin Graham makes it sound like the real Jesus is white European Jesus. Again, not historically accurate in any way. Anyway, many have criticized Christianity Today for their article about artists depicting Jesus as Asian. Not the point of the article. They did not have a normal nativity scene and then use like a yellow marker on the Jesus, on the baby Jesus. No, they said, hey, if the nativity scene we wanted to share that story with our audiences, this is probably what the people would look like. And isn't this familiar? Said it already. I also have to ask, why? We don't have to wonder or speculate about this. The Bible gives us very specific details about Jesus's earthly lineage. Again, the article did not challenge any of this. It said Jesus was born in Asia. Jesus was Asian. And Franklin Graham is like, I tell you, he was born on Earth. You get why this is dumb, right? It's not just me. What else did he say at the end here? He didn't come from Beijing, China, or from Jakarta, Indonesia. And the line before it, I didn't highlight it, but it's there. We know that Jesus was Jewish. There are Jews in other countries too. The article didn't say Jesus was born in China or Indonesia. Why don't any of these people read the article? I cannot be the only person who reads Christianity Today. I am not their target audience. Franklin Graham, whose daddy I thought founded Christianity Today. I think that's true. He, of all people, should read the articles, but nope. Even the interns who write all this shit for him, apparently they don't either. And then he says, is the current backlash to Israel defending its homeland against Hamas atrocities leading progressives, Christianity Today, not progressive, to attempt to sanitize Jesus from being Jewish? Guess what? We don't get to make God in our own image. My dude, all you people do is make Jesus in your own image. Jesus was like a Jewish socialist with dark skin, and conservatives think he wears a MAGA hat and votes Trump. Conservatives know as well as anybody, you can make Jesus in whatever image you want to make him in. But somehow he made this about I don't know, an argument against Israel during this conflict, which has nothing to do with Jewish people at all. He is who he is. Right. And he wasn't white, my dude. What do you think? Listen, if Franklin Graham is this dumb, I promise you the people who follow Franklin Graham are even dumber. Fox News, by the way, got in on this too. Here's the headline on Fox News' website. Christian magazine ridiculed after insisting Jesus was Asian. He was. Did you guys read the Bible? Listen, no one at Fox News reads. Period. But look at the subtitle, because this actually gets it right. By representing Jesus as Japanese, Indonesian, or Indian, art can convey the universality of Christ's birth, the article suggests. Yeah, if you make Jesus look like your people, it's easier to sell them the story. That's why Fox only has white people on all the time. By the way, you know what Fox News has promoted in the past? Megyn Kelly, when she was on the network. And do you know what she said back in the day? She famously said Jesus and Santa were white. The exact quotation, Just because it makes you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean it has to change, Kelly said on an actual segment. Jesus was a white man too. It's like he's a historical figure. That's a verifiable fact, as is Santa. Santa's white. Jesus was white. Oh my God. And Megyn Kelly was promoted as the smart one. She was on Fox because she was like the lawyer, not just the pundit back in the day. So, I mean, I'm not surprised Fox is like, yeah, Jesus was totally white. I'm not surprised all these other people also think Jesus is historically white, but also saying he's Asian is literally true because guess what? As an Asian, there's a wide variety of Asians. Asia's big. I know these people are not good at geography and history and science and English. I'm just saying, there are many types of Asian. And yeah, modern day Israel, modern day the West Bank, all that stuff, even if you want to say it's in the Middle East or a different West Asia, whatever you want to call it, it's still technically Asia. So yeah, the article was fine. All the people mad at the article are very much not fine. And they didn't read any of it. They just saw the word Asian and their mega senses got triggered and they had to be mad about it. Even though it was actually supporting the thing that they believe. Utterly stupid. I think I'll stop there. I don't know. There's just ridiculous. By the way, there was also a lot of racist tweets I did not show you, but I promise you there were a bunch of racist tweets as well. I don't know. But side note, before I'm done with this, I just got to say, I would love, with reason, to criticize Christianity today because they do say a lot of things that are worth criticizing. I will give you a couple quick examples and then I will finish off. Back in 2015, they responded to news about marriage equality and Christians supporting or not supporting marriage equality with an editorial. Breaking news, everybody. 2 billion Christians believe in traditional marriage. But this is the line that stood out to me. Because people were coming to terms with marriage equality. This is what their editor-in-chief said at the time. We'll be sad, but we won't panic or despair. Neither will we feel compelled to convert and distance ourselves from them. But to be sure, they will be enlisting in a cause that we believe is ultimately destructive to society, to the church, and to relations between men and women. They believe Christianity Today, as a publication, believes same-sex couples are destructive to society. Now that, as an editorial for Christianity Today, is something you can absolutely be mad at them about. Or if that's not enough for you, years ago, they published an essay written by, wait for it, a youth minister who turned out to be a sexual predator who went after a child. And they published an essay by the guy basically saying, I did this bad thing, but you guys forgive me. I'm a good guy. It's a long piece. It was basically a first-person narrative written by a sex predator, and it did not take into consideration the victim or anything like that. It just let this guy speak without any further insight. They got so much backlash for running this essay that they actually took it down from their site. What I'm showing you here is a saved copy of the article that went up later. You can't go to this URL anymore and see the article. They took it down. But I'm saying, publishing that story, absolutely Christianity Today should have been criticized for it. But publishing a photo essay by someone who understands art history and the religion, that's not a thing to be mad at them about. That article was fine. It was interesting. I found it interesting. All these Christians are mad because they can't read, and they can't even read a photo essay that had very few words. I'll stop there. What questions do we have right now? Jesus is white. He just is. That was the quotation. Thanks, Megyn Kelly, for setting the record straight on that one. Jesus. What is up? How do you leave Fox News and still turn out to be one of the worst people? She was not the worst person there at the time, but she was still that embarrassing. You know what I mean? There are so many worse people, and she still stood out for being like uniquely dumb. I don't know. What other questions? Those years in hiding could have been anywhere. I assume we're talking about Jesus. Britain, Spain, India, if made up, can make up subtext as to, no, you don't know where Jesus was when he was 19. He could have been off hiking, backpacking somewhere in Europe. We don't know. He could have been anywhere. Maybe he has families all around the world. We never know. White Christians are complaining that their white Jesus that is actually a brown Jesus is depicted as the Asian Jesus. Thank you. That's very well put. I like that. Yep. Yep. They love their white Jesus. It enriches the Bible story. It doesn't change it, right? Yeah, even if all of that were true, even if all the critics were true, and they were right, and it was unfair to depict Jesus that way, they are not changing the narrative. They are saying, hey, let's expand the story like Netflix entering a new country or something. Like, that's the bad Christian interpretation of what that article said. And even that they're mad about. I mean, that's not what the article was saying, but they're still mad about it, even though it would help their cause. It's hilarious. I think this is as much about an as an sorry. I think this is as much as an embarrassing display of the USA poor geography education because no one knows where Bethlehem is. People not knowing that Asia goes all the way to the Urals. I mean, yeah, that's accurate. I think they are mad because they just think, no, he wasn't born in Asia. He was born in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, in whatever Israel takes control of, or whatever. And they just don't think of it as Asia. I mean, there are all those stories of people who are like, what was it? When was it Puerto Rico that got hit by like a tornado or a hurricane years ago and Trump was tossing paper towels on them? And how many times did he say like, we're from America, we're here to help, or something? Like he and his followers would say things like, well, that's in Puerto Rico, not the United States. And it's like, buddy, you don't know how geography works and like what the United States has power over. It happens all the time. I think you're right. I think it's poor geography. But also, I would just add, I think with a lot of those MAGA people, they just like being mad about shit. And if someone gives them a crumb, they will turn it into a feast. It's what they love doing. They love getting mad about anything. What else? All right. I'm going to move to a different story. I haven't posted this one yet, but I wanted to share this with you in advance. I will start this off with another pop quiz here. What percentage of the people in Utah are Mormons? That's the question for you. What percentage of people in Utah are Mormons? Because I don't know if you asked me and I didn't know what I was about to show you, I don't know what I would say. I would probably think it's a pretty big percentage. And I guess I'll just toss it out there. I'm looking at the comments as I'm saying this. I see numbers like 70%, 80%, because it sure seems like Utah's where all the Mormons are, more or less. And even if it's dropping, where is it? And I'm seeing a lot of big numbers. And I will show you one thing right here. This is from the Salt Lake Tribune. Here we go. This is from the Salt Lake Tribune a couple of years ago, 2020. And this is what they said. Utah is now 60.68% Latter-day Saint. This stat relies on state population estimates and could change after the official 2020 census count. They were getting this number from the Mormon Church. And I'll show you this right here. The blue shows you how many new Mormons were getting added to the numbers. And part of the story was that these numbers, as you could see here, they go down as you move to the right. And that's a cause for alarm if you're Mormon. But the bottom part of this graph here, percent LDS in Utah, the percentage was going down over the years. So from 2013 to 2019, the percentage was going down from like 63% down to like 60%. Like, notice the y-axis there. It doesn't go down to 0, but it's going down from like 63 to 60. So it was declining. But those are the Mormon Church's numbers. And the Salt Lake Tribune was reporting that. So again, that story from 2020 said the Mormon population in Utah is now at 60% and it's on the decline. Okay, interesting. But that's not the story here. The story I want to share with you is there's a paper that just got published by some sociologists, and check out the headline here in this peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Religion and Demography. Mormons are no longer a majority in Utah. I'm going to pull up this article for you so you could see it. And I realized as I'm saying that, I think it's harder to share the thing I want to share with you. I'm going to do this for a second. I'm going to be able to share this with you, but let me figure out the right way to do this. The thing I want to bring up here, if I could ever find it, I'll find it somewhere. I'll tell you what, I'll show you a different way. According to those researchers, Mormons are not the majority in Utah anymore. They put the number at 42%. 42%, which is insanely small compared to what I thought it would be. You know what I mean? 42%. And where are they getting those? Whoops. Sorry about that. Where are they getting this number from? This 42% number? Well, I want to say, these are from sociologists Ryan Cragen, Bethany Gull, and Rick Phillips. They wrote this article. It just got published before Christmas. But what they say in their paper is that there are basically two ways to calculate the percentage of Mormons in Utah. One of them is you could take the numbers the Mormon church gives you and like divide it by whatever the census says this is how many people are in Utah, right? Mormons divided by everyone in Utah, you get the percentage. That's pretty straightforward. That's what I just showed you with the Salt Lake Tribune, where it said it's at 60.7%. Lower than before, but still a majority. But the other way to show you the percentage of Mormons in Utah is to just ask. You could do a survey and say, what religion do you identify with? And we have an example of that. In 2022, the Public Religion Research Institute did a survey. That's probably the most recent one. And they said that Mormons comprised 55% of people in Utah. So lower than what the Mormon church was saying, but still a majority. What the paper says is that both of those methods have serious flaws. To begin with, the Mormon church has a long history of giving overinflated membership numbers. Basically, if you were, let's say, 5 years old, if you were baptized and confirmed as a child, then the LDS church considers you a member forever, even if you stop believing as an adult, unless you tell them formally, take my name off your membership list. But if you were baptized and confirmed, you're on the list for life. So they consider that person a member. What if you're a toddler who's not eligible for baptism yet because you're not like 8 years old? I think that's the age. If you're a toddler, but you're born in a Mormon family, you're also considered a Mormon church member. Basically, everyone who's like Mormon adjacent is considered a Mormon unless there's a really good reason to not call them a Mormon. So they're overestimating the numbers. Okay, so that's a problem. By the way, according to the articles I'm quoting here, I can't show it to you, otherwise I would. Scholars have noted that local ward rosters are unusable as sampling frames for surveying Mormons. The church's claimed membership total may exceed the number of self-identified Mormons by 50%. They may be off by 50%. And in fact, the Salt Lake Tribune, in that article I showed you where it pegged it at 60%, they actually noted some problems as well. For example, I'm quoting here, one reporter found that the church claimed more members in one Utah county than there were residents of the county. That's how bad the church's rolls are. Okay, so that's number one. What's the problem with self-reported numbers? Well, sometimes the sample sizes are very small, which makes it a little more inaccurate. And also, and this is true of Catholics and evangelicals and whatnot, there are a lot of religious believers who may not believe in God anymore, or they may not believe in organized religion, even if they do believe in God, or they just don't attend religious services anymore. They're lapsed in a way, but maybe they call themselves Mormon for like cultural reasons or family reasons. So should you count the people who like, they say I'm Mormon, but I don't believe anymore? Are they Mormon? They're not, but they might be counted as some. Or what if they're just like, I don't believe any of this stuff anymore, but they don't go through the formal process of getting their name off the list? they're still called Mormons. They might self-identify as Mormons. So those surveys have problems too. So what the researchers did is they conducted their own survey, and this I will show you right here. They conducted their own survey of estimated Mormon population in Utah over time, and they took it from a bunch of different sources, and this is what they found. Check this out right here. Estimated Mormon population in Utah over time. And whoops, there we go. Check out this list. From 2001, they said it was actually 53% Mormon based on the numbers they had access to. And look what happens every year until we get down to 2022. Right down there, right above my head here. In 2022, they say Utah was 42% Mormon based on their survey, based on the people they were able to talk to and their estimates of the numbers. They had a much smaller margin of error for the sort of survey that they did. But that, they say, even if that's not perfectly accurate, it's definitely better than some of the surveys we have available. So that's where they're coming from. So that would be incredible, by the way. The headline to take away from all this is that Mormons are not the majority in Utah anymore. And more importantly, check this out. They have not been in the majority, according to these researchers, since, what year are we going to? 2007, when they were 49.9% of the state. They haven't been in the majority since 2007, and it's dropping and dropping and dropping. So fascinating. So now the question is, why would that be happening? Why is the percentage of Mormons getting lower? And the researchers offered 3 reasons for this shift. And these are just the 3 biggest reasons. There are always smaller factors, like maybe people are sick of all the headlines about the Mormon church being like evil and hoarding money and stuff like that. But they had 3 reasons. One is secularization. Basically, religion is becoming less important in the lives of a lot of Americans, and that applies to Mormons in Utah too. They actually had a graph here. I'm going to show you my version of the graph because I made it separately. But look at these numbers. On the left, what you're looking at on that side of the screen, on the vertical axis, that's what religion people say they were when they were 12 years old. So like their family's religion. The top part of the graph is what religion they are now. And you could see in the very top row, the people who said I was Mormon or LDS when I was 12, 24% of them, I'm looking at the yellow box here, 24% of them now say they are no religion at all. That is a huge jump from people who say they were religious believers, Mormons specifically, when they were younger, but who are not anymore. And that's part of it. So people are just becoming more secular. So that's one reason this shift is happening. The more people leave the faith, the less pressure there is for other fence sitters to remain in the religion too, for like social reasons. So like it's kind of a snowball effect right there. So secularization, that's reason number 1. Number 2, fertility. Basically, Mormons are having fewer babies than they used to. If you know Mormon families, like in your neighborhood, in your life, it's probably a family with like 7 or 8 kids. A lot of them certainly have that sort of experience, but that's no longer what's happening in a lot of Mormon families. According to the statistic that these researchers provided, in 2001, people in Utah as a whole, people in Utah had about 20 births for every 1,000 people. By 2022, that number is down to 14 births per 1,000 people. Not just Mormons specifically, but this is Utah overall. Fewer babies, though, means fewer automatic Mormons. And it also means Utah is starting to look more and more like the rest of the country when it comes to fertility rates. People in Utah have more babies than the rest of the country, but like by how much? Less and less each year. So if Mormons aren't having as many babies as they used to, they don't have as many people to add to that membership list, and the old ones are dying off. So the replacement is not happening like it used to. The third reason these researchers gave is migration. That Mormons used to go to Utah because that's where you find Mormons. And if you were not Mormon, you left Utah Because he was surrounded by Mormons and you wanted to go a place where you could like not have that. But that's no longer the case. First of all, the Mormon church, to its credit, I guess, has established Mormon temples outside Utah. There's a lot of them with more on the way. You know what I mean? So if you live in a big city, odds are you're going to be able to find a Mormon community no matter where you are in the United States. So that's one. So there's less of a reason to have to move to Utah to find other Mormons. But at the other end of this spectrum, Utah is kind of a neat place to live these days, right? Like the beautiful landscape, the national parks. It's a cheaper place to live compared to other options. So you have a lower cost of living. You have economic opportunity. So you have a lot of people moving to Utah for reasons that have nothing to do with the Mormon church. And what that does is the Utah population rises, but the Mormon population isn't keeping pace because some of them are leaving. The birth rates aren't making up for it. So the percentage of Mormons in Utah goes down. So all three of these things are all coming together to lower the percentage of Mormons in Utah. They actually have this neat little graph that I just want to share with you. This is in the paper. It's just fun to read because it takes a second to make sense of it. But look at this. They're saying, if you look at the bottom, Mormon majority in Utah. Let's see. Declining percentage Mormonism increases secularization. What happens to secularization? It reduces fertility because atheists don't have as many babies as everyone else. Religious people, devoutly religious people, Catholics, Mormons, what have you, evangelicals, the Duggars, they make up for the averages. They have high fertility rates because if they have babies, they have tons of babies. They don't stop at one. They treat babies like Pringles chips. So if you're secular and you're living in a secular area, that reduces your fertility. Declining fertility reduces the percentage who are Mormon, which reduces the Mormon majority. What about migration? In migration to Utah also reduces the percentage of Mormons. So like it's all a giant feedback loop. It all goes back to lowering the percentage of Mormons in Utah, which I find fascinating. Just as a sociological issue, this is so interesting. So one thing, and by the way, the Mormon church knows this is happening. How could they not know this is happening? Of course they know this stuff is happening. And what happens when the Mormon church starts to lose power because it no longer controls an entire state? That's a fun question to answer because as it stands, according to a survey in Deseret News, nearly 3/4 of people in Utah now support same-sex marriage, which the Mormon church does not. And that's a huge jump. Like, what does that say about the influence of the Mormon church these days in that state? And also, I mean, the Mormon church kind of dominates the state's culture and politics. It's a Republican-run state. But if non-Mormons find it easier to live in Utah and they start families with like-minded partners, like that snowball effect, it means more diversity. It means more types of people, not just Mormons, living there. I actually asked Ryan Cragen, one of the researchers who wrote the paper, is this trend actually accelerating? Like, are they going to just keep lowering that percentage of Mormons in Utah, or have we kind of hit the floor there? And he said he thinks it is accelerating. He told me it is. I'm going to share this with you here, just so you could read it. This is what he shared with me. It is now much easier to leave the religion because there are plenty of people who are not LDS, who you could spend time with, who share your views. Leaving the church in the 1980s would have been challenging because everyone would know you were no longer a member. You would be socially isolated. Today, while family who are still members might engage in some social isolation and worry that the person who has left may try to persuade others to leave or be a bad influence on those who have stayed, there are plenty of support groups in Utah for ex-Mormons and plenty of non-Mormons who are happy to welcome ex-Mormons to their social circles. So yes, declining religiosity is self-reinforcing. And isn't that cool to see? And the more we learn about how the Mormon church has shielded itself from accountability when it comes to sexual abuse, hoarded more than $100 billion meant to help others, and been criticized by some of its more famous members, it becomes really hard to control the levers of power. Which is not to say the church isn't going to try to reverse the trend here. What Ryan Cragen also mentioned is like, we have seen the church try to like stop the bleeding for lack of better words. For example, it used to be that if you were Mormon, you had to go on your like 2-year mission trip. And for men, that happened when they were 19. For women, they had to be 21. Well, guess what happened when you start your mission trips at 19 and 21? Some of those kids, they end up going to college for at least a year. And what happens in college when, especially if you don't go to like BYU, you're surrounded by people who are not Mormon. And you start to think, you know what? I don't know if I'm religious anymore. I don't think my stuff makes sense. And so that gap year, or not a gap year, but a year where you went to college, that was actually hurting them. So they decided several years ago, we're going to lower the age of missionaries to 18 and 19, men than women. Try to avoid those kids going off to college before they are indoctrinated more. Also, the LDS Church actually said recently there's legislation to protect marriage equality if the Supreme Court decides to turn that one back over to the states. The Mormon Church actually said officially, we support same-sex rights. We don't want the Supreme Court to overturn it. We think if you had a same-sex marriage, that shouldn't be taken away from you if a state decides to do that, which that's quite a switch from a very anti-gay organization. Not a huge deal. It's not like it was a leap for them, but it was surprising. And obviously the church still wants Mormons to have a lot of babies. So I don't know. I found that interesting. Like Utah is not a blue state, not even close. But as these demographics shift and it becomes less Mormon and less culturally red, you have to wonder what's going to happen over the course of years. Like last year, or in 2022, I believe, there was an election for U.S. Senate, and Mike Lee was the Republican who was running for re-election. And who did Democrats choose to represent them? It wasn't even a Democrat. They said, we're going to caucus with we'll all vote for this independent nominee, Evan McMullin, who is a Mormon, but isn't MAGA crazy. And we're all just going to throw our votes to him. And he lost. Evan McMullin lost, but he got more than 40% of the vote, which is to say the shift is happening. There will be a time when Republicans don't have total control of that state. And again, that goes back to Mormons are losing their power. The Mormon church is losing its influence. That's a good change, even if it'll take a while. You know what I mean? So interesting, fascinating story. I'll have more about this on my website. And if you're watching this clip later on, I'll have the link for the article about this and the paper in the description below. So I'll stop there for that story. What other questions we got here? Don't the Mormons keep people on the rolls forever? I believe that after you die, they do take you off their rolls. I could be wrong about that, but I think, and I also noticed there was a comment don't they baptize people who are not Mormon? Symbolically, yeah, but I don't believe they count Anne Frank on the rolls as a Mormon. That's not part of the membership. That's a separate weird thing they just do sometimes. I do believe religious people are their own worst advocate. Their views and approach is the biggest deterrent that keep new people at bay. I mean, yeah, ain't that the truth? Yeah, I mean, if you were actually pitching the idea of religion as a force for good, and then you see what religious leaders, what religious institutions are actually doing with their power, why would anyone want to join those clubs? I mean, if they said Jesus is a guy who helped the poor, and then they did, yeah, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. But none of them do that. Very few of them do that. So we don't get to have that conversation. So yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what religious organizations do all the time. They shoot themselves in the foot. Does the Book of Mormon musical have anything to do with it? I would love to know if it swayed any people to actually leave the church. But again, this goes back to the Mormon church actually trying to handle this stuff well. Because if you've seen the musical, it is critical of the Mormon church in very blatant ways. But what did the Mormon church do? They could have just opposed it and said this is blasphemous. That's what the Catholic Church would do, or some of its defenders. They did not. They actually took a page out in the playbill for the Broadway show and said, all right, you saw the show. Check out the real thing. Come to our website and learn about the religion for yourselves, which that was the right move. Well played, Mormon church. You know what I mean? So, but again, to your question, I don't know that the musical itself had anything to do with it so much as people became more vocal about their criticisms of the Mormon church. I mean, there are so many podcasts, podcasters, YouTubers who talk about the problems with the Mormon church and talk about it and criticize it in ways that they can speak to because they're coming at it from the inside and they know this stuff in a way that I never could. And when you have that stuff getting through to people and people can actually check it out for themselves, it makes a difference far more than I think like one musical ever could. I think calling it fertility is incorrect. Atheists are, oh, that's fair. Atheists are probably just as fertile as religious people. They choose not to reproduce as much. Reproduction rate, not fertility. Thank you for that correction. You are correct. My bad. Thank you so much for helping me through my deconstruction of Christianity. Thanks, Jimmy. You, Ehrman, and McClellan have helped me through this and eventually leaving Christianity. Thank you. That's very kind of you, Jimmy. Thank you. Glad I could help. I don't want to take credit for any of that. I just put this stuff out there. Thank you for watching and taking it seriously, I guess. Thank you. All right. Is there anything else there? I'm going to go to a totally different story. This is very interesting. Give me a second to pull this up so I can tell you about it. Here we go. Okay. Here's the story. There is a public school district in Alabama where they said our wrestling team, we're raising funds for our public high school wrestling team. They need food, they need water for their meets. Totally sensible. A lot of schools do that. And so they wanted to solicit contributions from the outside world. Again, totally normal thing for a public school to do. But I want you to read what this wrestling team, this is at Southside High School and Rainbow Middle School in Alabama. This is part of the Etowah, Etowah County Schools. This is what they sent out. And we're going to read this together because it is insane. This is the letter they said. Dear local church, we know our churches play a vital role in the community. We are looking for some area churches to connect with our Southside wrestling team in a very tangible way. I'm going to skip through some of this. We need water and granola bars. We're asking you to donate 6 cases of water, 4 packs of 24 granola bars to help out our team. We can always use more. That's a good starting point. You can also give us other stuff. That's all well and good. Check this out. We would like to give the churches who are able to donate a chance to speak into the lives of the students on our team by sharing a short 15-minute devotional. We're very excited about this opportunity again this year. We really enjoyed it last year. We look forward to connecting with you in this way. Yada, 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 yada. Okay. Holy crap. So what this high school is telling these churches is if you give us some water bottles for like $2 or buy some granola bars, which are also relatively cheap, we will let you preach to our students in 15-minute increments. What? Who thought that was a good idea? And then they were like, we're happy to do this again because we did it last year and it was great. Like, we committed a crime last year and loved it. We're just going to broadcast that to the world. Let's do the illegal thing again. Holy crap. Like, again, there's nothing wrong with the public high school going to the community for donations like this. The problem is this bartering system they have going on here. Like, there's no reason public schools should be going to churches, and they are only asking Christian churches, a chance to win child converts in exchange for, like, Uncrustables, which is what they wanted, for trail mix. You give us trail mix, we'll give you our students. They're not going to any mosques for this exchange. You know what I mean? If they were liberals, you know what conservatives would call that? Grooming. Like, are non-Christians allowed to even play this game? Because I'm sure there are like Satanist groups, atheist groups, and in Alabama who would totally be willing to give all of the food in exchange for the chance to preach to these kids for the price, because it's a small price. Like, they would never do it because on principle they are not interested in converting your kids. I'm just saying, I want to know who else can play this game. So for what it's worth, the Freedom from Religion Foundation has sent a letter to this district saying, hey, the thing that you're doing, that you're publicizing, stop it. We see what you're doing. You can't. This is from FFRF. It is well settled that public schools may not show favoritism toward or coerce belief or participation in religion, FFRF attorney Chris Line wrote. By explicitly inviting churches to proselytize to students, the district displays clear favoritism for religion over non religion and Christianity above other faiths. And yeah, that is it. That is what they are doing. No one else gets this opportunity. They are not going to other religious groups with this opportunity. So what the hell are they doing? Just a horrible, horrible idea. There is a right-wing media outlet called Yellowhammer News, and they covered this story by referring to FFRF as a, quote, out-of-state atheist group, because apparently you can only criticize illegal things if you live within a 2-mile radius of them or something. And for what it's worth, FFRF said they were only sending the letter because someone who lives in the community talked to them about it. But there was one quotation that right-wing media outlet had from a sitting politician that I wanted to share with you here. And check this out. Senator Greg Reed says he fundamentally... Go away, this thing. Whoops. Senator Greg Reed says he fundamentally disagrees. Churches are an essential part of the fabric of our communities across Alabama, he said in a statement to Yellowhammer News. Even more importantly, they are the means by which the gospel is preached and places where we worship God. Yeah, that's how churches work. I know. This week, we are celebrating the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He's speaking, of course, about everybody in Alabama. To him goes all the... I don't care. That should be our focus, and it should not be interrupted by out-of-state groups trying to push faith out of our lives and the lives of our children. In addition, Reed serves as... okay, I don't care. He's very high in the state Senate. Look at the last line. He added, "We need more children, not less, to hear the good news of God's saving grace." He's basically saying, I see nothing wrong with this. Preaching to kids about Jesus in a public school is totally cool with him. And again, if any non-Christian group even offered to preach to those kids for 15 minutes at a time for the price of like $2, he would go ballistic. But it's always okay when it's Christianity to these people because they want to live in a theocracy. It is so messed up how they do this. Like, religion is not a virtue. Christianity is not inherently good. School children are not better served by taking mythology seriously. And more to the point, FFRF is not trying to take faith out of their lives or the lives of their kids. They don't care what these churches preach or what these families indoctrinate their kids with. Their concern is that a taxpayer-funded public school system should not be in the business of trying to create converts for Christ by giving churches, and only Christian churches, the chance to preach to kids. Like, if pastors want to brainwash kids on their own time, that is their business, and it wouldn't matter what the atheists think. It wouldn't be illegal. But what this school district is doing, that is illegal. As I'm making this video anyway, they have not responded to FFRF yet. I hope they do, and I hope they just say, yeah, sorry, our bad, we're going to stop now. Haven't done it yet. I'll stop there. What other questions do we have here? Do granola bars count as the body of Christ? Only if you say the magic words. Only if you say the magic words. Then anything counts as the body of Christ. Is the Satanic Temple allowed to donate granola bars and water bottles to preach to the kids? You know, that's what I want to know. What would it take to allow the Satanic Temple in front of those kids? Because I don't think even if they got the in, they would not preach to those kids. They would probably, whoever the representative was, would talk about the importance of volunteering and helping your community. And kids, let me show you something cool about science, because that's what the Satanic Temple does when it involves little kids or something, if parents give permission. I mean, on principle, I'm pretty sure the people there would oppose anything like this, but I'm just saying the fact that even like Jewish groups, Hindu groups, they do exist in Alabama, but you know they did not get this letter. That's the point. Like, none of these non-Christian groups got this letter. That's disturbing. I'm going to uh, get to a different story here. Um, I'm going to start by sharing this tab with you. Okay, here's the story. It takes place in Alaska, and it says, Hail Satan prayers may be ending at Kenai Borough Assembly meetings. This is from early November, but I'll tell you why I'm talking about it now. The story here is that in Kenai Peninsula, part of Alaska, for several years now, they've had an open door invocation policy at government meetings. Basically, anyone could sign up to deliver an invocation, and diverse perspectives were represented. The reason you saw that article I just showed you back in November is because last month they said we should totally end that policy and limit all future invocations starting in January to, chaplains who work with the police department and the fire department. Oh, and by the way, the only chaplains who work for them are Christian. That's what they're doing. That's what they were proposing in November. And then when they had their meeting, I'll jump the gun here. They passed that policy. They said, yeah, we're limiting invocations from here on out only to Christians who serve as chaplains for local government organizations. And it helps to get into some history here because in 2016, this particular government body was on the verge of getting rid of invocations entirely. But they decided, no, we like prayers. So they decided to keep them. Again, 2016. They decided to keep these prayers in place. And in 2016, a Satanist, self-described Satanist named Iris Fontana, volunteered to give an invocation. And at the time, she ended it with the words, "It is done, hail Satan." And that led in all the officials here to create a new policy, basically to stop that from ever happening again. They said, yeah, we're not going to have this open door policy anymore because Satanists are using it. So guess what happened? They passed their policy. Those groups sued, and those groups won. In fact, the borough had to pay $80,000. Check this out. They had to pay a settlement of over $80,000 in 2019 because of their stupid invocation policy that limited what happened. You could see here, the Kenai Peninsula Borough will pay $80,000 in attorney's fees to the ACLU Alaska as a result of the borough's failed attempt to defend the assembly's former invocation policy. It will also pay $400 in court costs. So again, they got punished for that back in the day, and that's a lot of money, even if their insurers were the ones doing it. So that's what happened in like 2016, right? And so what happened is they went back to their old policy. Anyone can sign up to speak. But guess what happened when they went back to the old policy? Satanists signed up to speak again. So did members of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And they've been doing this for years now. They're part of the rotation. They come in, they do their prayer, they leave. And it's a very entertaining invocation all around. But it seems like now they've had enough. So what happened in November is they decided to offer up a proposal here. This is the official document here. And you could see, this is the part I got to show you. You could see this right here. Status, passed, final action November 7th, 2023. And here's the policy in question. This is what they were voting on. And you could see this right here, the resolution. There's a lot of whereases that I'm going to skip over. But the part that is interesting is right here, number 4. The invocation shall be voluntarily delivered by a resident of the Kenai Peninsula Borough who serves as a volunteer chaplain for the borough's fire and emergency medical service areas designated by the assembly president. That's the new thing they are adding. It's not, you don't just have to be a resident, you got to be a volunteer chaplain. That's what they decided to pass. And guess what? The volunteer chaplains at the policy are very limited in what they do. I actually looked this up because I was looking, how do I become like the police department chaplain? How do I become the fire department ambulance driver chaplain? There's no one website where you're allowed to just figure that out. But I did find an application for an organization called the Alaska Police and Fire Chaplains. It seems to be the catch-all group for this. And notice what they say here, because they don't say you have to be Christian. But what they do say is, tell us about your ministry. Tell us how many years of pastoral ministry you have, how many years you've been a chaplain, your previous chaplaincy appointments. Tell us about your education, your seminary, your chaplain school. Where did you go to school to learn how to do this religious thing that you are doing? Are you, whatever else? Are you licensed in any of these professions? Which is a fair question. List your references. Yeah, personal references, but professional references as a chaplain, which means tell us your pastor's number. You know what I mean? The bottom line is, if you're not already part of an organized religion that has the infrastructure to train chaplains, you're out of luck. You know who doesn't have this sort of infrastructure in place? Satanists, Pastafarians, any member of a minority faith, none of them have this sort of infrastructure. And I was looking at the website for the Flying Spaghetti Monster because Bobby Henderson, the prophet of that church, if you will, this is what he said. Very cool-headed, calm-headed about this. The proposed amendment by Kenai's officials might streamline meeting protocols, which is true, yet it could also exclude many voices, including ours, which goes against the inclusivity that is foundational to our nation's values. We advocate for a policy that either embraces all expressions of faith or opts for a neutral, secular space that truly accommodates everyone. As the Kenai Borough Assembly considers policy changes, we underscore the importance of upholding the freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, the freedom of and from religion. It's crucial to preserve that right for all faiths, including those like ours, to share our beliefs in public forums. Very, again, very cool-headed. That's a very sensible thing to point out there. So that's one thing. FFRF also wrote this group a letter. Here's what they said. The Kenai Peninsula Borough Assembly needs to belatedly follow FFRF's advice, because they sent a letter back in November, by concentrating on civic matters and reversing the practice of official prayer. FFRF is also making an open records request for all records related to this proposed policy. So again, yes, all of these people are correct and right. And the question now is what's going to happen. And the only, they passed this policy. It was unanimous. Every member of the government there voted for this policy. But it hasn't gone into effect yet. It doesn't go into effect until the very next meeting, which happens in January. And this is what one of the Pastafarians said right here. Here we go. Fritz Creek community member Barrett Fletcher, wearing a steel colander on his head and representing the Pastafarians, told the assembly he will probably file a lawsuit over the new invocation procedure. He said the only way to get rid of unwanted invocations was to ban them altogether. I'll be listening very closely to the chaplains that will be giving the invocation from now on. And if I happen to hear them invoke any specific deity while failing to acknowledge the true creator of the universe, the Great Flying Spaghetti Monster, I'll be suing. Is that tongue-in-cheek? Yeah. But again, what's the point there if those Christian chaplains are allowed to invoke their faith, the specific beliefs about their faith? Why doesn't anyone else get to do it? That's worth asking. And he says he's going to sue. I don't know if the Satanic Temple will get on board with that. I don't know if the Freedom from Religion Foundation or the ACLU Alaska will get on board with that. But it's a pretty clear-cut case because they won this sort of argument in the past. There's no reason they would lose it again in the future. So I hope that's what happens. That's worth keeping an eye on because this shouldn't be happening, but it is very clearly happening. So I'll leave it there for this story. We'll see what happens. I'll be following this. I will add one more thing, which is that a couple weeks ago, Iris Fontana, the Satanist that I mentioned earlier, who spoke in 2016, she actually just delivered one of the last open invocations a couple of weeks ago. And she also ended it by saying, "Hail Satan." I'll leave it there. Any other questions about all of this? All right. No other questions there. I think I'm debating how many more stories to do because it's getting late. Let me do one more story because this one really bothered me. And I did want to talk about this article all about it. Let me just pull this up here. Okay. Back in March, you all may remember that there was a horrific shooting at a place called the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a private Christian school. It's affiliated with the Presbyterian Church in America. And basically, a shooter who was armed with, I believe, 2 assault-style weapons and a handgun murdered 3 children and 3 adults at the school. Terrible, terrible tragedy. Now, after that tragedy, one of the things that was pointed out is that the same Republicans who always say, thoughts and prayers in response to a mass shooting, that really felt hollow here because this is a private Christian school. They have plenty of prayers going on there. They talk about God all the time in the school. So thoughts and prayers were not lacking at this institution. In fact, I think they had a prayer session, whatever they wanted to call it, in a ceremony at the beginning of their school day when this tragedy happened. So, what have Tennessee lawmakers done since the shooting? Because there was an impetus to get gun safety measures passed in the state. And the answer is exactly what you think would happen in a state controlled by Republicans. Nothing happened when it came to gun safety. Those legislators were focused on passing a law banning drag shows in the name of child safety, but they wouldn't do anything to prevent gun violence in the name of child safety. In fact, those same lawmakers actually proposed a bill to lower the age to legally carry a handgun in public from 21 to 18. You may also recall that Tennessee made national news this year because 2 black lawmakers and 1 white woman, all 3 of whom were Democrats, actually staged a protest. While a lot of people in Tennessee were protesting and urging those lawmakers, the Republicans, to do something, 3 Democratic lawmakers basically joined the protest and wanted change, and they were shouting for change from the floor of the House. And then the almost all white GOP lawmakers they expelled the 2 black lawmakers from the state legislature, but not the white woman. That was because they were protesting for gun safety measures. So the reason I bring all this up is because there was this article this week in the New York Times. It's a beautiful article. It's worth reading. It's really well done. The Covenant parents aren't going to keep quiet on guns. And what this article is talking about is saying, look, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, where did the shooting happen? It didn't happen at an LGBTQ nightclub. It didn't happen at a public school where the heathens are at. This happened at a private Christian school, and the people affected are largely the sort of white evangelicals who tell you thoughts and prayers instead of let's have gun safety, right? And so this article was saying, well, these parents were directly affected. I don't think any of the parents in the article were directly impacted by the shooting, but their kids went to the school. Like, their kids did not die. That's not who was in the focus of this article. But obviously, their kids attended the school. They were deeply affected, personally affected by what happened. And in this story, those parents are saying, listen, we used to be where you are at, white Republican lawmakers, but we are now asking you for some sensible gun reform measures. And you're hearing this from us, not crazy liberals, but from us. And so that was what the article was about, saying these Covenant parents also want this change, and they're not going to keep quiet about this. And some of the stuff in the article was kind of sad because you all already know where this is going. One of the parents, her name is Mary Joyce. This is what they said about her. Miss Joyce and other Covenant parents felt they stood a better chance than anyone at cutting through the divisions on gun control. Among them were former Republican aides, gun owners, lifelong conservatives who could afford to spend days at the legislature. So yeah, I mean, that's fair. These are parents who would normally be on the other side of the fight, but now it affected them. And because of that, and they make no qualms about that, they basically say in the article and in private, like, listen, we didn't really care when it happened to other people, but it happened to us. So we care now. And if we care now, maybe some of these lawmakers who don't care will also care now. And again, they did not. They didn't care at all. And you know why that happened. Like, they thought being conservative Christian Republicans with a history of putting guns over people would grant them some kind of power that everyone else didn't have. Lawmakers would see this is not a liberal issue. This isn't about liberals trying to take away constitutional rights. They would understand that basic safety measures were in the best interest of everybody, including gun owners and Republican families across the state. But that's the sort of thinking you only believe if you are fed a steady stream of conservative BS in your media diet. Like, Republican lawmakers, I know this, you know this. These parents did not know this. Republican lawmakers don't give a damn about what the Constitution says. They're not going to compromise on weapons because their whole identity is wrapped up in the belief that having the ability to murder your enemies at any time with the biggest, most dangerous, most potent weapons available is somehow foundational to our country. And any effort to moderate that is like a slippery slope to what, I don't know, just say the name Soros 5 times and there's your answer. And these parents did not know that. They thought these Republicans would actually listen. And then they learned the hard way that that's not how the game works. According to the article, these parents told their stories, their horror stories about what their kids dealt with, the trauma they now live with. And they called for really basic measures that would have prevented the shooter who had mental health issues from legally purchasing all those firearms. And the lawmakers just flat out ignored them. It didn't matter that one of the parents in the article was a Southern Baptist Convention leader, a former one, and also a former executive director of the state's Republican Party who owned guns, or that they were making arguments in the name of being pro-life. None of that mattered. It didn't matter that they argued that another GOP proposal was going to let gun owners take handguns onto school campuses. And these protesters said that's a horrible idea because it'll further traumatize their kids. And these Republicans are making that same argument. That didn't matter either. Basically, Republican lawmakers ignored them. They said one thing to their face and then did nothing on the floor. They did nothing of significance. They just don't believe mass shootings are enough of a problem that they should do anything to try and prevent them. I mean, these people always think guns are never the problem. It's always something else. It's always mental health. It's always video games. It's a lack of good parenting. It's always sin. And this is what, look, check out what one of the mothers said here. It was demoralizing, some of the mothers said, to be talked down to see lawmakers who had sympathized with their pain in private still vote against them in public, to be told that it was too soon for such serious changes, or that any change at all would threaten the Second Amendment. Did you know, the parents asked one another, that it was like this? How did I not know? Like, yeah, we know they're like this. You know why? Because when gay people and liberals and feminists and every group who identifies as who votes blue, when they made the exact same arguments, they were ignored repeatedly by these same lawmakers. And by the way, by a bunch of Democratic lawmakers as well, who get money from the NRA and other groups like that. So, yeah, it is demoralizing to be talked down to, but also, why didn't you care when those same lawmakers were talking down to the same make the people making the same case you are in the same way? Why didn't that bother you then? And like, why are you surprised it's happening to you too? It's a very much like a leopard's the leopard party ate my face too, says lady who voted for leopard party, however that line goes. Like, yeah, how did I not know? It's because you must only watch conservative media where they feed you bullshit. Like, come on. One of the other things these parents said here in this article, ultimately, the legislature sent Mr. Lee a few policy bills, but none that the Covenant parents had prioritized passed. When is it going to be the right group of people that gets affected for someone to listen? Adding, I thought we were close enough to their children. Yeah, when's it going to be the right group of people? The implication there is that so far the victims of mass shootings have always been the wrong group of people. It's like Hispanic kids in Uvalde, or, you know, people in other states, or gay people, or trans people. Like, and again, look, I want to be clear. I'm not mad at these parents who are now trying to do the right thing, because I think one of the things you have to allow if you want people to change their minds, if they do change their minds and they do end up doing the right thing, you can't hold a grudge on what their past used to be forever, right? Like you got to give them the leeway to do the right thing if you actually want them to change. And so good for these parents for finally seeing the light. I applaud them for what they are doing. But also it is kind of infuriating that they're like, "What? But I'm a white woman. Why aren't these Republicans listening to me?" Like, if you had some empathy years ago, maybe you would have realized the people talking weren't the problem. It's the lawmakers who refused to do anything. And the other part that I really wanted an answer to that this article did not offer is what are these parents going to do in the future? Who are they going to vote for state legislature and for president next year? Because if they're still voting Republican, then clearly they haven't learned a damn thing. And then, by the way, it's fair game to criticize them for not learning anything. So nothing in the article suggested that these people are going to stop voting Republican because that party is beholden to gun lobbyists. They might support political challengers willing to compromise on guns, but they're not openly saying they'll vote for a Democrat who will actually take action. And if they're not going to make that argument, I don't know why the lawmakers would listen to them. Who cares what these people protest if they're still going to vote for you? Nothing's going to change then. Like, I don't know. Nothing in the article suggests that's going to change. By the way, 40% of white evangelicals, roughly 40% of white evangelicals own a gun, and that's higher than any other religious group. But it never crosses their mind that believing God will protect them should not correlate with the need for more weapons. I just want to point that out. I mean, I wish these people understood. I wish it bothered them more that these lawmakers didn't listen to any other group in the past. And yeah, they're not listening to them now, and that's kind of funny and kind of sad. But also, these lawmakers haven't changed. And if you keep voting them into power, they're not going to change. They have no incentive to change. How privileged and spoiled must some of these parents be to believe lawmakers who ignored other people are going to listen to them? Like, why do they think they would be taken seriously? Because they're the right color and the right religion and in the right socioeconomic class. Like, I don't know. Maybe they think, I don't know. The alternative to what they are doing is to just vote for sensible people who will actually pass sensible legislation. But Tennessee, I should say, it's a gerrymandered state, like so many red states. It's designed to keep Republicans in power, but that only works because conservative Christians keep voting for them. If these people actually cared about this issue as much as they do, there's a way to get these lawmakers to change their mind. And it's not by telling these Republicans their sob stories and hoping they empathize. It's by saying, okay, I'm going to tell my church and everyone in my church absolutely not to vote for you. And we're going to vote for the Democrat, even though we disagree with them on a lot of things. Guns are such a big issue to us that we're willing to let our other issues slide. If they did that, if pastors who care about this issue had the courage to say that, because you know the IRS doesn't care if they endorse candidates from the pulpit. And if all these pastors said, fine, we're going to endorse Democrats and we're going to tell every white evangelical we know to vote for Democrats, that might get something done. As far as I can tell from this New York Times article, none of these parents have the courage to do that. Certainly their pastors do not have the courage to do that. And so I don't know why they expect anything to change. So, like, I appreciate that they're trying to do something, but they're not really doing the thing that would make a difference. And without that sort of honest introspection and a realization that the people they helped elect are the problem here, nothing is going to change. I'll stop there. Any other questions? That story just pissed me off. Oh, thank you for that donation. That's for your next ticket to the Creation Museum. Just kidding. Hail Satan. Buddy, I appreciate that, but $4.99 is not enough for a ticket to the Creation Museum. That place charges like crazy. Seriously, go to the Creation Museum's website right now and go look up ticket prices, because it's like Disney World expensive or close to it or something, but it ain't $5. It's like 40 at least. If there are no other questions, then I'll just say, like, Happy New Year to all of you. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate all that. Thank you to Den for helping out as he always does. You could support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemmett. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, I'm doing a whole series on the book of Revelation. Week by week, we'll go chapter by chapter in that book. That will start on Sunday morning. You can already get the notification on YouTube on this very channel if you're watching it on YouTube. So I hope you will check that out as well. And I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.